Hello, and welcome to Cast Adrift, a behind-the-scenes podcast for the Sojourn audio drama, where we have discussions with cast and crew and answer your questions. Every episode of Cast Adrift is available for free on YouTube, but if you haven't listened to the full audio drama, you can find links to retailers in the description. Both Volume 1 and Volume 2 are out as of the time of this recording. I'm Larissa, I'm the associate producer and the voice of Captain Cassandra Farron, and today I'm talking with visual artist Leon Woon. He's the one responsible for designing all of those beautiful covers, all of the wonderful marketing assets we've had, and just generally the magic pen behind the visual style of the show. Today we're going to be discussing how he approaches this visual design and what special things he's been doing to bring the Sojourn alive. Spoilers ahead for Volumes 1 and 2, maybe. So, hi, Leon. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me over.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's just jump right in. I have a bunch of questions for you.
Sure.
But to start, how about you walk us through your process for drawing something for the show?
Well, basically, it first starts off with a brief or a rough idea from either Dan or Gab. And once I begin a back and forth with them, we're trying to refine the idea, trying to get more references from them as to like what generally do they want it to look like, or do they have like anything in mind from pre-existing references and the like. Then I'll start off with a rough sketch just to get an idea of how it's going to look, like whether how is it going to be framed. And once I get feedback from them about whether that's good to go or if there's any alterations that need to be made, then it goes into further refining. What I would do is, let's say for colors, especially if it's for something new and we're still trying to explore what the color scheme is for the whole thing. We'll get that done first, flat colors, as it were. And if they're cool with it, then I will begin refining it even further, adding things like shadows or dynamic lighting or additional details like, say, weathering or scuffs and bumps if we're talking about a ship, or how the material will look like if, say, we're talking about someone's costume. Like, say, like, do you want it to look like gold? Do you want it to look like copper? Is it cotton? Is it matte or shiny? And the like. All in all, the turnaround process would be fairly quick, like, say, a week or two, depending on my schedule and theirs.
Nice. And do you start predominantly with like pen and paper for your initial sketches, or are you entirely a digital man?
Oh, no, yeah, I'm definitely a digital guy. What I've done is I used to be more of a pen and paper kind of guy back then. So once I transitioned into digital medium, I just fully went on with that. It's also a lot easier, I would say, to working digitally, because it's a lot easier to just clean it up, start over, or even warp and edit things in Photoshop so that I don't have to just like erase it or toss it out the window and start all over again.
Makes sense. Do you use any other software other than Photoshop, or is it pretty exclusively in Photoshop?
Oh yeah, it's predominantly Photoshop, yeah.
Okay. So you obviously draw a lot of different kinds of art pieces for the Sojourn, character shots, landscapes, space shots, spaceships. Is there one in particular that you find the most joy in doing?
I think at the end of the day, the characters are still my favorite to do, because there's just something about kind of like when you're creating a new character, you're kind of like creating a person, especially with how detailed a brief Dan always gives with all the characters in the Sojourn. So from the ground up, I'm given a very comprehensive understanding of who the characters are, what their motivations are, how they're like, even before they're voiced by the amazing talents we have. So it's always a pleasure to kind of like figure out how their mannerisms would be, even as I'm sketching them, even as I'm like slowly bringing them to life.
Yeah, that's something that I've noticed with your art is how much is conveyed through their posture and their facial expressions.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a cornerstone when it comes to character design in a way where that one pose, that one silhouette should explain what the character is and whatnot. Because there's a 3-second rule that art and design has, where a viewer just needs that few seconds to look at a character, look at say a ship or a planet or something like that. That should be enough for them to take in that the initial vibes that, okay, this is what this character is, this is what this planet is, this is how this ship behaves, and like, is it a human design, is it an alien design, that kind of thing.
So you definitely subscribe to the judge a book by its cover philosophy.
Well, it can be flipped on its head, actually, where the outward appearance tells you something, but as you go further in and you know more about the character, or more is revealed in time, then it becomes a subversion in its way.
Good point. Do you have a favorite character that you like to draw?
I think, well, I'm going to be real basic and say, no, not say basic, but, and it's not, I swear I'm not trying to kiss up to you or whatever, but Cass is really a joy to draw most of the time, because there is a lot of history. There is a lot that's unsaid and beneath the surface for her. The past trauma that she's been, how she's coping, and trying to convey emotions for her is something that I try to take care with doing, especially because, like, how should I say it? It's more than just the surface level when it comes to her, especially with how much the story has already explored about her history and her motivations and the like. As a second, I think Croft is also really fun to draw, especially because of how cheeky and how easygoing he is. It's very lighthearted in that sense, where it always seems like he has a quip just ready to shoot off.
Yeah, I would say that you've definitely managed to capture that like lighthearted, witty feel of Croft. And yeah, I've actually, like, when I was doing my initial recording for episode 1, I was looking at the character reference art quite a bit just to get a feel for how Cass carries herself. I was informed a lot by your art style, so thank you very much for that.
Thanks.
How much of Cass's backstory had you been informed of before hearing any of the episodes? Because obviously you had to draw the character art for that proof of concept minisode that went out before the whole episode had been written. So how much of her story had you been told going into the design process?
I think, I recall, very early on, Dan actually gave me sort of like an excerpt about a nightmare she was having, and that actually detailed more about her past in the CDF and what happened that made her be so traumatized and not want to be in a leader's position anymore. I'm trying to avoid any spoilers, but yeah. So that already from the get-go informed me about what kind of a person she is, what her motivations are, and about just how much she's carrying on her back and how she tries to, well, I wouldn't say hide it, but she wants to leave it behind, but it just keeps eating at her, even as Meds tells her that, she has to move on. She has to take the healthy approach to heal herself.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried conveying that in how she has this determined expression most of the time, where I guess, like, I kind of tapped it a bit to her lineage too, where from my understanding is that for some veterans, for real life military veterans here, people can actually pick them out from a crowd, or they can pick out fellow veterans from the crowd too, because of how they carry themselves. There's just the way that they do is like their mannerisms, how they speak, how they stand, and that comes from basic training, I guess. Yeah, they kind of hammer out most of that kind of lax attitude out of you. And with her heritage, with her family background, it was something that I felt that, yeah, I should try and implement that too for her.
That's really, really interesting. I love hearing about how much thought and detail went into it because when you look at the piece of art, it doesn't seem like it's been thought about, but you have this palpable subconscious feeling that you can't quite put your finger on, even though there's no one thing you can point to that says that tells me that she's got a military background. It's so cool how much preparation and time has gone into a piece of artwork.
Yeah, thank you. Well, yeah, that's what makes it all the more special, I think, especially when trying to design a character or bring a character to life when they have such a very well written and very extensive backstory to them. And when the creator, or let's say the writer in this case, and the artist have a synergy, or are able to have a mutual understanding of, okay, this is where the character needs to go, or what this is their history, this is how they are now, it just adds more life, because it's already quite easy in a way to have all that on a character in a kind of like a surface level. But when you have a further understanding of the character, especially for those of us who've listened to both volumes of the Sojourn already, that added history just gives that more depth, I would say.
Definitely. Has an actor's performance changed how you draw their character?
Funnily enough, I don't think so, because I would, once again, I think that's how the uniqueness of this team shows its strength, because I've heard from Daniel has told me a couple of times where the actors have said that the art that I've done first kind of inspired the talents to how they want to perform the character. And well, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I think it's that synergy of the world building and the foundation that Daniel and Gabriel already set, along with my art, along with the breath of life that the voice actors have brought into it, that just makes the whole thing go that much further. And in fact, allows me to, I won't change how the character looks or behaves, but it just gives me that much more room, or that much more fuel in my mind to think that, oh, okay, so it can even go this much further. Their expressions could go that much more. Yeah, it just breathes that much more life into that character, which in turn allows me to think more on how they can behave.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that with me. So conversely to my earlier question, who is the most difficult character to draw, or who takes the longest to get right?
I think one of the hardest to get right, I think, was
Putting you on the spot. Think fast.
yeah. Well, the two, I would say, it's the two main spoiler characters for season 2. They, like for Empress Valendra, I think, yeah, she took quite a while to design, especially because Dan and Gab had a very specific vision for her, especially for her physiology, for example. Because when I first drew her, I drew her with a bust, as I would typically assume that a female humanoid would have. And interestingly enough, Dan and Gab pointed out that, oh, she doesn't have one because that's actually something that's very uniquely specific to mammals for us as humans. So I thought, that's actually a very interesting concept.
Other than that, what else was difficult about her?
Well, I think getting the emblems on her costume just right and getting the materials just right. It wasn't difficult per se, but more like it was something that it has to symbolize her faction. Let's say, it has to be in line with the design language for her race and for her people, which was something more angular, something more. Well, I wouldn't want to say brutalist because it doesn't reach that kind of aesthetic, but I had to make sure that as the leader of her people, her costume represents her race. And what else? I think the material also, the material also had to be an interesting contrast of let's say very satin, very matte cloth materials in contrast with very shiny, very contrasting, very popping gold and copper. And I think it turned out well.
Yeah, I think her design is absolutely beautiful. I think you did a fantastic job with her.
Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah, and and then I also had to make sure that the color of her skin does not clash too much with the clothes, because I think it was something that Dan and Gab also pointed out when it came to working on her and the Inquisitor, about making sure that the color, because of how different it is from the rest of the cast, that it does not stand out too much, and it doesn't clash or blend in.
Yeah, distinct but not distracting.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tightrope act in that sense sometimes when it comes to color schemes, or making sure that things don't blend in too much or don't stand out for a particular character, which is, I think, kind of the reason why that we choose to go for more muted tones. If you notice, even for, say, like something like the CDF uniforms, even though they're really 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 blue, but it's not to the point of being cartoonish, or it doesn't stand out too much, I would say.
Yeah. So you mentioned briefs and really detailed descriptions from Daniel and Gabriel about all of these different aspects that are going into the piece. Would you say that those detailed briefs are more helpful, or do you find them really restrictive?
Oh no, they are really helpful in the sense where it depends on the artist that you asked, I guess. But for me, the more detailed, the better, because especially with the more prep material I get, it gives me more room to visualize or think about how the character is. So they are already beginning to take shape in my mind, like how they act, what their past was like, how do they behave now, and all those kind of things. If the brief contains kind of subverts their their characteristics, kind of subverts their appearance in a way, it allows me to be able to convey that when I'm trying to create the design for them too. And the great thing working with Daniel and Gabriel also is that, say, if I come up with a particular sketch and it goes one way, and for, say, like designing a character, I would actually give them a draft of, say, 3 to 5 different poses for the character, and they would I give them the choice of selecting which one they like best. And sometimes they could say, oh, I like the pose from A, but maybe the expression from B and the clothes from C. So it's very productive in that way, having that amount of choice and them having a very clear direction of, okay, I want the character to go this way. And it just makes the whole process a lot smoother. It also helps because where they want the character to go, narratively speaking, it just makes it a lot easier for me to kickstart that design process, I would say.
Cool. Yeah, that's really good to know, because from the layperson's perspective, you would assume that an artist wants as much freedom as possible, and the more room you give them, the more creativity you're going to get. But do you find that that's actually not the case?
Well, yeah, it really does depend on the artist, because some artists, they prefer having that amount of wiggle room to explore what they want. And if the other party, they are okay with that, they if they basically just tell the artist, go ham, you do whatever you want. I'll tell you whether it works or not. There is always a good and bad to it, I would say. For one thing, if there is a very loose deadline, for example, they have all the time in the world to just explore and do whatever the heck they want. Yeah, sure, go for it. But for me personally, I just prefer having that bit more direction or focus for where we want to take it.
Have you ever snuck anything in that wasn't in the brief?
Oh yes, a couple of times, and I leave it to Daniel and Gabriel being that much more into sci-fi than I am, having that much more of a deep understanding of things. Then they pick out hey, this is from Star Wars. this looks a little too this looks a little too much like from Halo and whatnot. So yeah, I tried. And the funny thing is that there were a couple of things that I intentionally tried to sneak on, like say a belt buckle from Star Wars, a very common belt buckle, and then I was like, nope, that's straight from Star Wars. That's just too recognizable.
And a belt buckle, okay.
Yeah, and like yeah, there were a few things that I did not that I subconsciously put in because as an artist, we usually have a visual library of sorts in our mind, which is why it's very much advised for us to look at as many references, digest as much as we can. Say, if you want to design something sci-fi, don't just look at Star Wars or Star Trek. Look into other stuff like say Battlestar Galactica, Stargate, Ringworld, for example. Anything. Just don't limit yourself. Don't pigeonhole yourself into one or two franchises, which is admittedly something that I've done quite a bit because I'm actually quite selective, quite picky with what franchises I digest, not just for sci-fi, but even say for something like fantasy and whatnot. So it's a bit of a crutch for me to kind of like go back to just referencing something from say Star Wars or Halo, because those two are my most favorite sci-fi franchises.
Oh, so you have to actively broaden your horizons to inform
exactly.
your art better.
Mm-hmm. Which is also kind of conversely why sometimes the direction, a more clear direction from say Daniel or Gabriel helps in that sense, because they've already kind of like have a idea that okay, I want you to reference from this something from this particular franchise, just a little bit, maybe like an Easter egg or something from the real world, say like pre-existing space shuttle modules or spacesuit designs and whatnot, something grounded in reality, which is actually how most established franchises do things. Say like the concept artists working on things like The Expanse or even Star Wars and whatnot. They sometimes, sorry, not sometimes, most of the time, they base it on something pre-existing, because you're not supposed to just pluck something out from thin air. It just doesn't work that way. That's something that my lecturers drilled into me when I was in art college, and it was something I taught my students in return when I taught in that college after that for a few years.
And what is the primary reason not to pluck something from thin air?
Well, especially for say for fantasy, sometimes you can kind of get away with it if it's something more hand wavy, but especially if you say something like sci-fi, where it has to be grounded in at least some modicum of reality. You can't just imagine things out. Say like you can't just say that, oh, this engine goes 10 times the speed of light. And okay, sure. Like, so what is it powered by? And how are the crew not turned into paste and whatnot? Nah, it just works. Don't think about it. It doesn't really work that way. I mean, even for something as simple as, say, costume design or weapon design and whatnot, you can't just pluck it out of thin air because you gotta, or say armor design, you have to understand how, let's say, armor works. You have to make sure you're not pinching any limbs or whatnot. You can even, or you should be able to articulate your arms and your legs or your head properly, or you have to make sure the barrel of the gun is aligned with the magazine. You have to make sure that the bullet will be able to travel out properly, which is something infamously inaccurate in, I think, the Warhammer 40k bolter gun, which is I only know very little bit of the Warhammer 40k franchise, but from what little I know, the artists have kind of ragged a lot about how the bolter was not designed very logically, where the ejection port for the shells do not align with the barrel, something like that.
So making sure that you are pulling from real life so you get the little details right.
Yeah. You always, the general rule of thumb is to take something from reality as the starting point, as the foundation, then build on top of that and add on whatever flavors you want.
I like that philosophy. So let's move on to a couple of fan questions here. The first one here is from Visho Davis. If it were entirely up to you, would you change some character general appearance and why?
If it were up to me, well, that's a bit of a thought. Well, not really. Well, I think what I would like to do is perhaps maybe give some of the characters different outfits or something. Some especially to like kind of like to explore more on like say casual outfits, or heck, even Meds wearing a marine uniform from her past, something to that extent, or yeah, just things to add more flavor to the current character, but not change them in a fundamental way.
Okay. I guess that really just goes to show how much that detailed brief and the initial concept preparation stage just really makes it easy to get it right the first time.
Yeah, I think that initial back and forth between me, Daniel, and Gabriel helped to really cement how the character's initial appearance took form, and anything after that now is just adding on top of that instead of breaking them down to build it up again, as it were.
Right. Cool. Okay, next question is from Izzy, the Wiki Witch of the West. What step in the design process do you find the most enjoyable?
I think it's the most enjoyable, but also the most harrowing, where I come up with the initial sketches of trying to explore how either the characters or the scene will play out. Well, it's both a blessing and a curse, because the blessing part is that it's just almost raw creativity in that sense, where you're just exploring it at first. You're just seeing what works and what doesn't, and that's also the harrowing part, because there's that self-consciousness and that uncertainty in the back of your mind, like, okay, is this going to work? Is this not going to work? But what the hell am I doing? That's a constant struggle, I think, with creatives, not just for art, but even for something like writing or making music, where
it sounds familiar.
Right? Yeah. And it's that uncertainty is, I think, in a way, it's kind of like our fear response, where it's, you have to acknowledge it's there, and it's not exactly a bad thing, and it also actually means that your mind is actually kind of telling you that there's that safety barrier there. Well, so because if you're just going at it 100% without any reservations and whatnot, that's actually a little bit of a bad thing. because you need to know when to rein yourself back a little. Unless that was kind of part of the brief, where it's like, go wild, do whatever the hell you want.
Right. Keeping it within the brief while exploring as deep as you can into it. That it makes sense to me that that's the most rewarding and challenging part of the process. Okay, last question here, also from Izzy, the Wiki Witch of the West. If you could design anything for the Sojourn, what would it be and why?
Oh gosh, if I could design anything, I think I'm gonna give not just one answer here, because there are a couple of things that I would like to do. Maybe one of them would be to design more weapons, because we only have a limited amount right now, which is necessary for the story. But it would be nice to think of a few more, and maybe also wondering like what does like whether there's any not to say power armor, but what did the Marines wear when they went into battle during the war, and exploring on more smaller CDF ships. Yeah, I have a bit of a bias to the CDF, because it's always the blues in the way. It's like it's like if I'm playing Red Alert 2, I will play as the Allies. If I'm playing Command and Conquer, I'll play as the GDI, the stereotypical good guys, quote unquote. So like I'm curious to think up a bit on like how would some gunboats look like, some smaller ships or corvettes, those kind of things. I really like small-ish ships and how they behave in a larger fleet. How would they perform in a combined fleet operation? That kind of thing.
Interesting. It's so funny to me that your answer to the earlier question of what do you enjoy drawing the most was characters, but you want to do more ships. That's interesting.
That's the funny thing about me, in that sense, where I would like to design or come up with ship designs, but I am absolutely poor, and I'm absolutely terrible with it, because yeah, oh no, yeah, really I am, which is why I thank God that Gabriel is so meticulous, and so already has such a, how should I say, a very clear idea of how he wants the ships to look like, and they already look as good as they do. And especially because he too can, I mean, he also draws, so he's able to actually come up with the base design first of what he wants the things to look like. And the funny thing is that the creatives, the writers, or say writers or directors and whatnot, when they can draw, it makes the whole process a lot more smoother and a lot more exciting in that way, because people like James Cameron and Guillermo del Toro, they can draw too, and they work very closely with the concept artists on movies, like say, like for Avatar. James Cameron did a lot of sketches and a lot of brainstorming with the artists, so that's why most of the designs that they come up with look the way they do, because it becomes a very collaborative effort on their part. To come back to the whole spaceship versus characters thing, like I just would like to design more ships and whatnot, but I know I'll be very, very poor at it. Characters are more of my forte, I would say. As for why you're wondering why I'm not excited or looking forward to drawing more characters, it's because in a way I leave that kind of surprise or that kind of not knowing what to expect next to you guys, because when you guys come up with new characters for me to draw and whatnot, there is that, how should I say, that there's that fun in that, finding out that, oh wow, this new character is here. How will they add on to the story, and that kind of thing. Where else, I would say like the ships, like especially if they're like ships that have like minor roles, or the weapons or marine armor or all those kind of things, they supplement the story I think it blends a bit into the background, where else these characters that we have for the Sojourn, they take front and center, they drive the story forward. So I don't consciously think about adding on to that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of a way for you to maintain a spoiler-free as as much as you can within the constraints of being the visual artist.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, that does it for all of our questions today. But do you have any projects that you're wanting to shout out, or social media platforms that you want people to see some of your work on, or anything like that?
Oh, sure. Well, you can look me up at ArtStation under Leon Woon Irvin. That's IR space VIN. If you want to see more of the art that I've done for the Sojourn, because I've posted everything up there. You could also follow me on Twitter with that same username.
And we'll leave links in the description as well. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, Leon. This was really informative and really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for having me on.
This has been Cast Adrift, a behind-the-scenes podcast for the Sojourn audio drama, featuring discussions with cast and crew and answering your questions. If you would like to ask questions of your own for future episodes, join our Discord server, link in the description. You will also get announcements for future topics and announcements about the show in general. And then you also get to meet other fans and chat more about the show and chat with some of the creators from time to time. You can also follow the show on Twitter at the Sojourn HQ for updates about our general progress on Volume 3 and beyond. Subscribe to this YouTube channel for more exciting content that I'm not sure I can share with you yet, and click the bell so that you'll be notified when that drops. And yeah, thank you all for watching. Fair winds.